Most grocery stores in America hold 72 hours of inventory, 3 days. That is the buffer between the truck that delivers your food and the shelf where you pick it up. 72 hours between a fully stocked store and an empty one. And 70% of all agricultural and food products in the United States are transported by truck. Every piece of produce, every cut of meat, every gallon of milk, every loaf of bread arrives at your grocery store on a truck that runs on diesel. And diesel is at $5.38 per gallon. And 73% of the farm workers who harvest the food that goes on the trucks are foreign-born. And a FEMA survey found that only 36% of Americans have a 3-day emergency food supply at home, which means 64% of the country is relying entirely on those 72 hours of inventory at the store being replenished on time, every time, without interruption. And I want you to understand the difference between what this country has experienced and what this country is about to experience. Because every food conversation for the past 4 years has been about price. Eggs are expensive. Beef is expensive. Coffee is expensive. Groceries are expensive. And Americans have adapted to expensive. They have traded down. They have switched brands. They have reduced portion sizes. They have eliminated luxuries. They have learned to absorb a price shock because a price shock, while painful, is manageable. You pay more. You get less. But you get something. What Americans have not experienced since the pandemic lockdowns of 2020 is an availability shock. An availability shock is different. It is not that the eggs cost $7. It is that there are no eggs. It is not that the lettuce costs $5. It is that the shelf where the lettuce used to be is empty. And an availability shock produces a psychological response that a price shock does not. It produces panic. And panic produces hoarding. And hoarding produces deeper shortages. And deeper shortages produce wider panic. And the cycle accelerates until it consumes the supply of everything in the store, not just the item that was originally unavailable. We saw it with toilet paper in 2020. We saw it with baby formula in 2022. We saw it with eggs in 2023. And what I am going to document in this video is why the conditions for the next availability shock are forming right now across multiple product categories simultaneously, and why the summer and fall of 2026 is the window in which those conditions are most likely to produce empty shelves in American grocery stores for the first time since the pandemic. The products that are already disappearing from American grocery stores and why each one is a warning signal for something larger. Olive oil is disappearing. The USDA predicted a 10% global olive oil decline for the 2025 to 2026 crop year. Harvests in Greece have collapsed because of climate-related production failures. Producers in Jordan are worried their olive trees may not survive recent record-breaking temperatures. Bottles are becoming scarcer, and the ones that remain are priced at levels that most families cannot absorb. Cauliflower prices fluctuated by 230% in 2025, driven by extreme weather in California, which grows 90% of the nation's cauliflower. Unexpected frost and heavy rainfall devastated plantings. A bad weather year coupled with increasing demand produced shortages on grocery shelves. Cilantro crops have been having a horrible few years, and 2026 does not look any better. Much of the U.S. supply comes from Mexico, where growing regions dealt with severe drought alternating with damaging hail. Growers battled a destructive aphid infestation and a parasite that causes cyclosporiasis. One supplier warned customers that cilantro from a major producer had problems with yellowing. People on social media reported not finding any cilantro in some stores. Romaine lettuce has been in short supply, with one restaurant notifying customers that salad options would be unavailable due to the shortage. And the epic egg shortage of 2025 was the result of bird flu that has led to the culling of nearly 185 million birds since 2022. Purchase limits were imposed, shelves were empty, prices hit records, and the USDA reported lower projected numbers for egg production in 2026 due to lower layer inventories. The conditions for another egg shortage remain present because no avian flu vaccine has been approved for widespread use, and the virus continues to circulate. Baby formula is facing another shortage after a global recall covering more than 20,000 products across 40 states due to pieces of blue plastic found in a production filter. Congress is discussing a bill to prevent shortages and increase FDA oversight. Iceberg lettuce production is threatened by California's water supply crisis. Florida's February 2026 freeze, one of the coldest in state history, devastated citrus fruits and Asian vegetables. Wild blueberries are being negatively affected by climate change. Cottage cheese demand has surged so fast that producers cannot keep up. Cumin harvest in India is expected to decline 14%. Garlic faces a difficult growing season in China and southern Europe, and each of these shortages is occurring for a different reason: climate, disease, labor, trade, demand. But they are all occurring simultaneously. And when multiple products become scarce at the same time, the consumer does not respond to each shortage individually. They respond to the cumulative signal. And the signal is, the shelves are not full. And that signal triggers the panic buying response that turns a shortage of 5 products into a shortage of 50. The fertilizer pipeline that feeds America is broken, and the harvest that arrives this fall will confirm what the data already shows. The CEO of Helios AI said we are at the beginning of the worst food crisis we have ever seen, with global food prices heading 12 to 18% higher by the end of the year. 50% of globally traded urea transits through the Strait of Hormuz, which has been functionally closed for over 5 weeks with tanker traffic at approximately 8% of normal volume. The Qatar Fertilizer Company, the world's largest urea production site, is offline. Urea prices surged to $650 per ton. Goldman Sachs reports nitrogen fertilizer prices up approximately 40%. The Fertilizer Institute estimates U.S. farmers face a shortfall of approximately 2 million tons of urea this spring. And American farmers responded by cutting corn acreage by 3.5% and pivoting to soybeans, which require less fertilizer. That decision, made in March and April 2026, determines what America harvests in September and October. A smaller corn harvest means higher corn prices, higher feed costs for cattle, poultry, hogs, and dairy, and higher prices for every animal protein product in the grocery store. And the cattle herd is the smallest in 75 years. Beef prices are already at record highs. Farm bankruptcies surged 46%. Farm debt is projected at a record $624.7 billion, and a supply chain expert at E2Open said diesel makes up 30% of transportation costs, and the 41% diesel increase translates to a 10 to 15% increase in food transport cost that applies to every product on every shelf. And food manufacturers have already pulled every cost management lever from the pandemic and tariffs. Shrinkflation, reformulation, reduced promotions. There is nothing left to absorb. The next increase goes straight to the consumer. And the FAO laid out 3 scenarios. If the Strait disruption lasts more than 3 months, which it already has, structural damage to food supply chains, locks in higher food prices for at least a year, and export restrictions by major producers could trigger a crisis comparable to or worse than 2022. And here is where the price shock crosses over into the availability shock. When food prices surge rapidly, countries that export food impose export restrictions to protect their domestic supply. India banned sugar exports in 2023 and extended the ban in 2024 to satisfy domestic demand. If corn-producing nations restrict exports as prices surge, the U.S. becomes more dependent on its own reduced harvest. And if the harvest is smaller than projected because the fertilizer was not there in April, the domestic supply tightens. And when domestic supply tightens, the 72-hour inventory buffer at your grocery store becomes the choke point that determines whether the shelf is stocked or empty. And 72 hours is not a lot of margin in a system where one disruption, a hurricane, a trucking strike, a refinery outage, a port closure can delay deliveries by days, not hours. The farm labor crisis is the shortage nobody wants to talk about because the solution conflicts with the politics. 73% of farm workers in the United States are foreign-born, and the immigration crackdown that intensified in 2025 is removing workers from the fields during the exact months when crops need to be planted, cultivated, and harvested. A tomato does not wait for labor policy to be resolved. It ripens on a schedule determined by biology, not by legislation. And if nobody picks it, it rots in the field. And the food that rots in the field is food that never reaches the truck. And the food that never reaches the truck is food that never reaches the grocery store. And the shelf where that food was supposed to sit remains empty. And the consumer who walks into the store and sees that empty shelf does not know why it is empty. They do not know that a tomato rotted in a field in California because the worker who would have picked it was deported or left voluntarily because the enforcement climate made it impossible to continue working without risking detention. They just see the empty shelf, and they feel the anxiety. And the anxiety drives them to buy more of whatever is available, which drains the remaining inventory faster, which produces wider shortages, which amplifies the signal that something is wrong with the food supply. And the labor crisis is not limited to field workers. The Food Institute reported that fewer available workers, supply chain disruptions, and economic pressures have combined to produce fewer job openings across the entire food system in 2026. From field to processing plant to packaging facility to truck to warehouse to store, every link in the food chain is operating with fewer workers than it needs. And packaging supplies are in short supply because the same labor shortages that affect food production also affect materials producers. Paper, plastic, glass, and other common packaging materials are constrained. Without packaging, products do not make it onto grocery store shelves, even if they have been grown, harvested, and processed successfully. The product exists, but it cannot be delivered to you because it cannot be packaged, and you never learn why the shelf is empty. You just see the absence and fill it with fear. And fear is the accelerant that turns a manageable shortage into a crisis. And the farm labor crisis extends beyond the fields. Meat processing plants, dairy operations, poultry facilities, and food packaging plants across the rural United States depend on immigrant labor. The meatpacking industry, which was already operating at reduced capacity due to consolidation and pandemic-era closures, is now losing workers to immigration enforcement and the chilling effect of enforcement rhetoric. A worker who has legal status but whose spouse does not may leave the state rather than risk separation. A worker with a pending asylum case may stop showing up to work rather than risk being identified. And the aggregate effect of thousands of individual decisions made from fear is a labor force that is smaller than it was last year in an industry that could not afford to lose a single worker. And when the processing plant operates at 80% capacity because it cannot fill the line, the cattle that were raised and slaughtered cannot be processed fast enough. And unprocessed beef backs up in the cold chain. And the backed-up cold chain reduces the throughput that reaches the truck. And the truck that arrives at the distribution center carries less product. And the distribution center sends less product to the store. And the shelf that was fully stocked yesterday has gaps today. And nobody on the shelf side of that chain understands why. They just see the gap. And the gap feeds the anxiety. Panic buying is the force multiplier that transforms individual shortages into systemic empty shelves, and nobody can stop it once it starts. Every time there is news of a potential shortage, people panic buy. We saw it with toilet paper in 2020. We saw it with baby formula in 2022. We saw it with eggs in 2023 and 2025. When people hear that something might become scarce, they rush to buy as much as they can, which creates even more shortages for the people who arrive at the store after them. And the dynamic is self-reinforcing because each round of empty shelves validates the fear that drove the previous round. The person who arrived at the store and found no eggs says to themselves, "I should have bought more last time." And the next time they hear about any shortage of any product, they buy double or triple what they need because the memory of the empty shelf overrides the rational calculation of how much they actually require. And social media amplifies this cycle at a speed that did not exist during previous food crises. A single photo of an empty shelf at a Walmart in Orlando can reach 10 million people within 24 hours. And each person who sees that photo makes a mental note to stock up. And when 10 million people simultaneously decide to stock up on the same products, the demand surge overwhelms the supply chain instantly. The 72-hour inventory buffer evaporates. The trucks cannot deliver fast enough to replace what was bought in a single day of panic purchasing. And the stores that were fully stocked at 8 a.m. are stripped bare by 2 p.m. And the photos from those stripped stores are posted on social media, which triggers the next wave of panic buying at stores that were not yet affected. And the wave propagates outward from the initial trigger until it reaches every grocery store in the country. That is the mechanism. And the trigger in the summer and fall of 2026 is not a single event. It is the convergence of egg vulnerability from ongoing bird flu, the fall harvest shortfall from the fertilizer crisis, the labor shortage from the immigration crackdown, the transport cost surge from $5.38 diesel, and the produce shortages from climate events in California, Florida, and Mexico. When multiple triggers converge, the probability that one of them produces a viral empty shelf photo approaches certainty. And that photo is the match that lights the panic-buying fire. And once it is lit, nobody can stop it. Not the government, not the grocery chains, not the supply chain managers. The fire burns until the fuel runs out, and the fuel is the food on the shelves. And here is the detail that should terrify every supply chain professional in America. The 72-hour inventory buffer was designed for a system where disruptions are local and temporary. A hurricane hits Florida, and the trucks are rerouted from other regions to resupply. A snowstorm blocks deliveries in the Northeast, and the stores are restocked within 48 hours once the roads clear. The system works because the disruptions are isolated. One region is affected while the others compensate. But what happens when the disruption is national? When every region is simultaneously experiencing higher prices, reduced supply, farm labor shortages, transport cost surges, and the same viral panic buying trigger. The 72-hour buffer in Florida does not get replenished by trucks from Texas because Texas is experiencing the same conditions. And Texas does not get replenished by trucks from California because California's harvest has been devastated by the same climate events. And the entire system, which was designed to handle isolated local disruptions, confronts a simultaneous national demand surge that exceeds the capacity of any region to compensate for any other region. That is the scenario that produces nationwide empty shelves, and every condition necessary for that scenario is either present or forming right now. And a JBS USA cyber attack in 2021 temporarily strained the entire meat supply chain from a single point of failure. One company, one computer system, one ransomware attack, and the meat supply for the entire country was disrupted. The food supply chain is not a distributed network of independent systems. It is a concentrated pipeline controlled by a small number of very large companies operating through a small number of very large distribution points. When one point fails, the ripple propagates through the entire system faster than the 72-hour buffer can absorb it. What you can do right now before the shelves empty and why the next 90 days are your window. I have described the conditions. Olive oil disappearing, eggs vulnerable, cauliflower volatile, cilantro scarce, romaine in short supply, baby formula recalled, the fertilizer pipeline broken, the harvest reduced, the farm labor force depleted, the transport costs surging, the packaging constrained, and the panic buying mechanism primed by 4 years of intermittent shortages that have trained American consumers to respond to any signal of scarcity with immediate hoarding. Those conditions exist right now, in April, before the summer heat stresses the grid, the fields, and the supply chain, before the fall harvest confirms the reduced yields, before the first viral empty shelf photo triggers the panic wave. You have approximately 90 days to build a food reserve that will carry your family through a period of availability disruption without contributing to the panic that makes it worse. And building that reserve is not hoarding. Hoarding is buying 200 eggs when the shortage is on the news. Preparation is buying an extra bag of rice every week for 3 months while the shelves are full and the prices have not yet surged. First, build a 30 to 60-day supply of shelf-stable food that your family actually eats. Rice, beans, oats, pasta, canned vegetables, canned fruit, canned tuna, canned chicken, peanut butter, cooking oil, dried fruit, powdered milk, powdered eggs, salt, sugar, flour. These are not exotic survival items. They are the foundation of every meal your grandmother ever cooked, and they store for months or years without refrigeration. Second, learn the FIFO method. First in, first out, use the oldest items first and put new purchases at the back. Your reserve is not a static pile in the closet. It is a rotating inventory that ensures nothing expires before it is consumed. Third, buy a little extra every shopping trip, not a cart full. An extra bag of beans, an extra jar of peanut butter, an extra bag of pasta. Spread the purchasing over weeks so that your buying does not contribute to the demand spike that causes the shortages you are preparing for. Fourth, build a relationship with your local food sources, farmers markets, community-supported agriculture programs, local butchers, Local bakeries. The products that come from local sources do not depend on the national supply chain and the national trucking network and the 72-hour inventory buffer at the national grocery chain. They come from a farmer 30 miles away whose harvest goes to a market 10 miles from your house. That is food security that no supply chain disruption can touch. Fifth, grow something. Anything. A tomato plant on a balcony. Herbs in a windowsill planter. A small raised bed in the backyard. Every tomato you grow is a tomato that does not have to survive the supply chain, the trucking network, the diesel price, the labor shortage, the packaging constraint, and the 72-hour inventory buffer to reach your family's table. Self-sufficiency at even a small scale reduces your dependence on a system that is showing cracks in multiple places simultaneously. And if you depend on SNAP for part of your food budget, the urgency is even greater. 2.4 million Americans are losing SNAP benefits under the expanded work requirements. Food bank demand has doubled while donations have declined, and the SNAP benefit formula has been frozen, meaning the USDA can no longer adjust the Thrifty Food Plan to reflect the actual cost of a healthy diet. Your benefits are locked at a level that does not account for the 12 to 18% food price increase that is arriving this fall, which means the purchasing power of your SNAP benefit is declining every month while the prices climb. And the food banks that were supposed to supplement what SNAP does not cover are overwhelmed. Feeding America reported that demand at food banks has doubled since the pandemic and in some regions tripled. And the volunteers and donations that sustain those food banks are declining, because the same affordability crisis that is driving people to the food bank is reducing the capacity of the people who used to donate. The system that catches the people who fall through the cracks of the food system is itself cracking. And the fall of 2026, when the harvest prices hit and the SNAP cuts take full effect and the food bank demand surges further, will be the moment when the cracks become visible to everyone, not just the families who have been feeling them for months. And the families that build a 30 to 60-day pantry reserve between now and September will have the most valuable asset in a food crisis: time. Time to wait for the panic to subside. Time to wait for the supply chain to recover. Time to wait for the trucks to arrive. Time that their neighbors who did not prepare will not have. I want to close by saying something that I believe is the most important sentence in this entire video. The food supply chain in America is not broken, but it is fragile. And the difference between functional and broken is exactly one disruption that the 72-hour inventory buffer cannot absorb. One hurricane that closes a port for a week, one trucker protest that blocks a highway for 3 days, one bird flu outbreak that forces the culling of 50 million birds in a single quarter, one export restriction from a major producer that reduces the supply of a staple crop by 15%, one viral photo of empty shelves that triggers a nationwide panic buying wave. Any one of those events can flip the system from functional to empty in less than a week. And right now, in April 2026, multiple conditions are aligned that increase the probability of each of those events occurring in the next 6 months. The fertilizer crisis is real. The labor crisis is real. The climate events are real. The bird flu is real. The diesel prices are real. The product shortages are already appearing. And the panic buying mechanism is primed by 4 years of conditioning. The question is not whether empty shelves will appear somewhere in America this year. They already have for cilantro, for romaine, for cauliflower, for baby formula. The question is whether those localized shortages cascade into a systemic event that affects every store in the country simultaneously. And the answer to that question depends on whether a trigger event occurs and whether the American consumer responds with panic or with preparation. You cannot control the trigger, but you can control your response, and the time to choose preparation over panic is right now, while the shelves are still full, while the prices have not yet surged, while the window between warning and impact is still open. Use that window. Build your reserve, strengthen your local food sources, grow what you can, and share this video with every family you know, because the families that are prepared will not contribute to the panic. And the families that are not prepared will be the ones emptying the shelves when the trigger arrives. And once the shelves are empty, they stay empty until the supply chain recovers, which takes days or weeks, not hours. Be ready. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because I am going to be tracking every food supply indicator, every shortage report, Every price movement, every weather event affecting harvest, and every policy change affecting farm labor in real time. No spin, no survival product to sell, just the data about what is available, what is disappearing, and what is coming next. Take care of yourselves out there. Feed your families, stock your pantries, use the 90 days you have left. And I will see you in the next one. And I want to leave you with a thought that I hope stays with you every time you walk into a grocery store between now and the end of this year. The abundance you see on the shelves is an illusion of permanence. It looks like it has always been there and will always be there, but it is not permanent. It is the product of a system that requires every link in a chain spanning from a fertilizer plant in Qatar to a field in Iowa, to a processing facility in Nebraska, to a truck on I-80, to a distribution center in New Jersey, to a shelf in your local store to function without significant interruption for 72 continuous hours. Every 72 hours, the chain must deliver, and the chain is under more simultaneous stress right now than at any point since the spring of 2020. The fertilizer is disrupted, the labor is depleted, the fuel is expensive. The climate is damaging harvests across multiple continents and multiple crop categories simultaneously. The bird flu is circulating with no approved vaccine. The trade policy is creating uncertainty that prevents importers from committing to shipments. The packaging materials are constrained, the food banks are overwhelmed, the SNAP benefits are being cut. And the American consumer has been conditioned by 4 years of intermittent shortages to respond to the first signal of scarcity with the panic buying that transforms a manageable shortage into a systemic crisis. Every one of those conditions is real. Everyone is documented. Everyone is happening right now. And the 72-hour buffer that stands between all of them and the empty shelf in your grocery store has never looked thinner. Do not be the family that discovers this when the shelves are already empty. Be the family that used the 90-day window to build the reserve that makes the empty shelf irrelevant. Because when the shelves empty, the families with a pantry eat. And the families without a pantry panic. And the panic makes the empty shelves last longer for everyone. Your preparation is not just an act of self-preservation, it is an act of civic responsibility. Every family that is prepared is one fewer family competing for the last cans on the shelf. One fewer family driving the panic wave that empties the next store. One fewer family standing in the food bank line that is already too long. Your preparation makes the system more resilient for everyone, and that is worth more than anything else you can do between now and September. Prepare, not in fear, in clarity. And share this video with every family you care about, because the information in this video is the difference between a family that eats and a family that panics. And nobody deserves to panic. Not in the richest country in the history of the world. Not with 90 days of warning. Not when the solution is as simple as an extra bag of rice every week and a plan written on a piece of paper at the kitchen table. Use the time. It is the most valuable thing you have.